Hello, and welcome. You may think that playing the third octave on the oboe is just prohibitively difficult. You may think that your oboe can't do it. You may think that you're just not built to play the third octave on the instrument. Today's presentation is to tell you why that's not true. Everyone can play the third octave on the oboe. Today I'm going to discuss 4 tips to improve the third octave on your instrument. My hope is that this makes it easier for you to achieve beauty in those extreme high notes on the oboe. Hello and welcome. My name is Erin Brophy. I am the principal oboe player of the Saskatoon Symphony and a sessional lecturer at the University of Saskatchewan. Thank you for joining me today. Why am I doing these live presentations? Well, it has a lot to do with where I'm from and how I got started on the oboe. So I'm Canadian and I grew up in northern Canada. If you can imagine a beautiful crystal clear lake on the edge of a forest surrounded by lots of rocks and not much else. That's where I'm from. Not a very populated place, beautiful place to be a child. And then I started to play the oboe, and that's when all the trouble started. Because without a lot of population, there were no other oboe players around. And for that reason, I did not have access to a functioning instrument, functioning reeds, or good information. This, of course, is before the internet. Seems like a long time ago now. And I really struggled. And there were numbers of times in my development as a young musician that I almost gave up. It was just too hard. Now, if you fast forward 25 years, I've been performing professionally and doing a lot of teaching. And now that I help other people in the oboe, I reflect that my journey did not have to be that difficult. It didn't have to be that frustrating. And so that's why I'm doing these live presentations, is because I don't want you to have to struggle the way that I did. It's also why I created an online program called the Oboe Path. The Oboe Path breaks down the steps necessary in order to play the oboe with joy and ease. It uses a group online masterclass, personalized feedback, and a customized plan to allow an oboe player to bring joy to their oboe playing. The group online masterclass allows an oboist to join a community of like-minded oboe players. This helps with inspiration and accountability for practicing. With the personalized plan, an oboe player is able to fit improving the instrument into their very busy life. And with personal feedback, what that means is when an oboe player goes to their practice sessions, that they know exactly what they need to practice and they see the results immediately. It's a wonderful program. Let's get to it. 4 tips to improve your third octave on the oboe. So the first thing that I would like to talk to you about today is a third octave key necessary? Now, let's start with what's a third octave key. Okay, so this here is a back octave. This is the back octave that you use for G sharp, F natural, E. This is the side octave key right here that you use starting on high A. And then when you get past high D, there's a third octave key. It's this little octave key here, and it opens up a little key right there. And the third octave key was added to the oboe about 25 years ago. It sort of became standard. And yes, it does make it easier to play from a high E up. But it is not absolutely necessary. And I speak from experience because I learned all my extreme high notes before I had a third octave key. In fact, I got my first professional job on an oboe that did not have a third octave key. So it's totally possible. I have played third octaves on Bundys, on Selmers, on all kinds of instruments. You don't need to have that third octave key. If your instrument does have a third octave key, that's great. It will make it a little bit easier. If it doesn't, then you are going to have a superpower that when you do get an oboe, and if you ever have access to an oboe with a third octave key, it's going to be like a walk in the park. Because if you can play the third octave without the third octave key, you can play it on any instrument. So the third octave will become your superpower. The second thing I want to talk to you about is your embouchure. So I think of the embouchure having different places that I want to place it depending on the place on the oboe that I'm playing. And when I'm thinking about the third octave, I'm thinking of taking a little bit more reed in my mouth. So I'm playing a little further down on the reed so that that third octave pops out. Sometimes when I'm demonstrating this for students, what I say is I do it sort of an extreme way and go, you put your mouth pretty far down so you can feel how easily those high notes pop out. And then we kind of dial it back because you don't actually have to have it super far down. It's just a little bit further than any other place your embouchure might be on the oboe. And what that does is it just sort of, it contains the reed and it makes the higher vibrations pop out. So I would recommend experimenting with that. If you're trying to get that high E out, for example, and it's just not coming, just take a little bit more reed in your mouth and see if that helps. The third thing I would suggest is as you're trying to improve your third octave, because that's a very specific place in your embouchure that you're going to be working, is I would suggest that you not just practice up there. Is that a double negative? Let me say that a different way that's a little bit more clear. If you are practicing a lot of that third octave, make sure that you're also connecting to other parts of the oboe. What I have observed is that someone who is on that journey to learn the high E or the high D sharp or the high F or whatever the note is that slowly becomes the only thing they practice. And I understand why they do this. I have totally been guilty of this. When I have something in my mind, I want to figure it out. And what I would suggest, what I've noticed is that when an oboist does that, is that their embouchure starts to then just live up in that high place. And it starts to affect the quality of their sound overall. And then they start having a harder time getting low notes. So what I would suggest is a balanced approach. If you are playing a lot of high notes in your practicing, terrific. Make sure that you balance it out with playing from low C down. Maybe have an exercise that is working on those two extremes, just so that you are remembering what the flexibility is that you need in your embouchure in order to get those notes out. So that would be my suggestion. The fourth thing that I would suggest is if you are looking, say for example, you're at the stage where you can play all of your high notes, but you feel like they're all equally kind of fragile, is I would suggest working on one note at a time. If you are in the position where you can play, say, for example, the high D and you want to start going up in your range, I would suggest adding one note at a time. And the reason I would suggest this is through experience of having taught many an oboe player these high notes, that the fingerings for the high notes are not as intuitive as the rest of the fingerings on the oboe. So they're kind of quirky and they're kind of tangled. I would describe them as being tangled. And your fingers have to do some things that it's not used to doing on the instrument. And what I've observed is that if I teach D, E flat, E natural, and F all at the same time, that is very confusing because your fingers have to do funny things. And so what I have found in my teaching is I'd like to do it one at a time. So really establishing D sharp before we move on to E. Really feeling very comfortable, and that is a note that you could call forth at any time, and then adding E into your practicing. I find that students find that difficult. Oboists find that difficult because you have to have patience with yourself to accumulate that skill. But I think over the long term, you will be very glad that you spent all that time on D sharp, for example, because then when you add E, you are really solidly rooted in that D sharp. So you feel really confident and you don't start intertwining the fingerings. Because what I see a lot of is for the high E, high D sharp, is that the pinkies get all confused as to where to go because there are various combinations. And so if you can start by just accumulating one and feeling really confident with it, that goes a long way to feeling really solid about your high notes. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are curious about other things you can do to improve your oboe playing, I am offering a free oboe seminar that starts on Monday. I'm so excited. There are people from around the world that have registered. I'm really excited to connect with all these lovely oboe players. It's entirely free. Registration is required. There is more information about these sessions and what we'll be covering and how it will work underneath this presentation. You can just click on the link there and it'll give you the information you're looking for. And I hope to connect with you there. Let's all become the oboe players that everyone wants to play with. The oboe players we were meant to be. Play the oboe with joy and ease. Take care.